Hi, good day. So today we're going to be showing you how to connect your chatbot to a REST API, and that allows your chatbot to have even more functionality than a standard database. So one example of that would be for currency conversion. So what we're going to do is we will let the chatbot allow the user to talk to the chatbot and ask it to convert some information or convert a currency by the use of just spoken or just by some text. And so let us do that right now. So the first thing we need to do is to create intent for currency conversion, and so we're gonna do it in this way. Okay, so we will allow him to say it in a few ways. Can you convert 15 to USD? What is 100 ABC? GBP to USD, and so on forth and so on. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that. So in Dialogflow, okay, so for in Dialogflow, let's just add the intent here. Okay, so I think I called it convert intent. Great, so the training phrase is convert 15 USD to SGD. So this USD we will set as a system entity, which is a currency. We can do a search here, and then this one will also be a currency. So in fact, you can see this. You can see the currency name. Let's just look for Dialogflow currency name entity. So you can see a bit of definition of what this currency is, or what this system entity is. So let's just verify this in the document. Yeah, I called it currency name. Right, then we will have another one, 15 here, which will be a number, right? This will be a number, right? And so let's just have a few, let's have a few here. Now, of course, I'm going to just guide it a little bit, no? So let's just add a few more training phrases to that. Okay. Can you convert 100 at 50 GBP? Okay, so same thing, just annotate that. Oh, okay, so wait, I think we need to change the parameter name. Sorry about that. So here I have currency name and currency name 1. I'm going to change this to match our requirement to call it amount from currency and to currency. All right, so I'm just going to call this thing amount. Then I will just call this thing from currency, and this is to currency. Okay, yeah, okay, so let's just do that again. Okay, so this one should be correct, but let's just, so this should be from currency, and this is, okay, so let's add, well, maybe one more here. Convert 200 JPY to euro. So JPY here will be the from currency in the euro too. So let's save that. Okay, now obviously to make sure this triggers properly, you probably want to set some context, maybe a previous intent which will trigger the currency conversion, right? You can also make sure that these parameters are required, right? So you could actually add this and make sure that this is placed here. Okay, this one actually should be deleted. So if anything is missing, it's supposed to ask you for more details. Okay, so let's just test it, make sure. Say convert SGD to USD. Okay, so the intent is correct. So from currency. Okay, so you notice, by the way, class, you notice that this one is like in an array format. So to make things simple, we'll make sure that it's not in an array format. So please make sure to remove this isList. isList will allow you to, will basically set the object to an array. So I'm just going to get rid of that, okay? And then save that again. So just make sure this isList is actually unchecked. All right, so let's try that again. So convert 10 SG to USD. There, so it's actually getting the correct information now. And the intent is convert intent. All right, so simple as that. So now, why don't we add now the code to actually read this and actually do the conversion. Okay, so the code is actually right here. Okay, so before we do that, we have to understand the API, details about the API. So any sort of API will have some URL that you have to send to, as well as maybe an access key for security, and it will also give a sample of the JSON response. So let's go ahead and test this, the API. So the API is under this fixer.io. Yeah, it's under fixer.io. I believe I wrote it here somewhere. Yeah, so you have to sign up for the account. It'll take a minute to do that, and then you should get it. So let's just go to fixer.io now. Just do a search on Fixer. Yeah, so you can see that this is a Exchange API. All right, so you have to get an account first and get a free API key. So let me log in now. Okay, so you will be given an API key. Okay, so the important thing, class, when you're dealing with APIs, this is when you're coding for a chatbot or for an app or for a website. You have to read the documentation and find out what's the URL and the format that you have to send the information. Okay, so in this case, what is the information? So you want to look at the documentation. Okay, so I'll just click on documentation. And so you can see from the documentation, you actually send this, you have a base URL like this, and basically you send it the access key, right? Like so. And then it'll come up with some information. Okay, so you have to read the API and do the proper tests on the API. Okay, so let's look at this. Okay, so let's look at this one here, latest rates endpoint. Okay, so if you look at that latest rates endpoint, where was I? I took this from, yeah, so under this you can choose here, so I'm just gonna choose, you can either choose this or this one. So I think the practical chooses this latest rates endpoint. All of this will will do some function, so you have to read up on this if you want to use any of these. So for the latest rates endpoint, it will be something like this. Okay, so basically you have to give it the API key, the base USD, GBP, and Euro. Okay, so this is basically a GET request. It's not mentioning anything else, so it's just a GET request. So you can test this out in the browser, right? We can test this out in the browser or in Postman. So let's test this out first in the browser. So let me just format it a bit nicer. Okay, so let me open okay, so I'm just gonna format it to make it look a bit nicer, make it more correct, right? And so the API key is from, let me just, okay, I think it's in my dashboard. Yeah, so my API key is this, right? So I'm just gonna copy that and put it. Now when you do URLs, you don't want to put spaces and the like, so you have to remove all the spaces. So what this is doing is, if you know anything about the web, this is what you call this question mark. Anything after the question mark is the data you sent to the server. You call this a query string. Okay, so normally it will be in key value pairs. So that's very common in GET requests. Okay, so in this case, you can give the base. I believe for this free version, you can only get the base as euros. Okay, but you will have some sort of conversion here. And then you can set the symbols that you want to convert. Okay, so it'll be something like that. And then the symbols will be whatever symbols you want. So let's just put here SGD and maybe, right? So you can see that this is a GET request. You can actually copy this and test this in Postman or in the browser. Okay, so let's try it in a browser first. So it's saying something like invalid base currency. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Sorry, I forgot to place. There has to be the ampersand here, because this ampersand actually separates the key value pair. So this is one key, that's a key and a value. So it will be key equal to value, ampersand, key is equal to value, then another ampersand, key is equal to value. So that's this sort of format in the web. I think you might have observed that when you browse websites. So again, the format of this, you have to read the documentation and the samples. So there is that step that cannot be avoided. If I copy this now, let's put this into a browser. Now you see, right? You got some information. It gives some additional information like the timestamp, which is the date that it occurred. You have the rates here in a JSON. Basically, this whole thing is JSON. See, so normally APIs will return in JSON format. So your route has to read this, okay, and get the important information and return something to the chatbot. Okay, so it's showing you all the rates. So it works, no? So you can test this. It works. You can test this on Postman as well. Let's just test this on Postman. Okay, so I'm just going to paste the same thing here. Okay, you can ignore all of these things. This thing will not be used because it's a GET request. So you can see that it returns a value here. So that's for that. Okay, so next, now that we know how it looks, we can write our code. So let's go back to our notes here. Okay, so let's just type the code. So the code will look something like this. Okay, I'm going to skip through. This first part actually is the same as the second part. I actually did this for testing purposes, but I'm going to skip through for time constraints and go straight to, because we're already familiar with this, right, in the other videos. So you can see I have this data. I'm going to copy and paste this first and explain to you what is going on. Okay, so what I've done here is I've commented out this route. And so what I'm going to do is just paste the route here. Okay, okay, it should be app.post, right? So it's the same route. I'm going to format it a little bit to make it more presentable. Okay, let me just install the request first. So it'll be npm install request --save. Now, I'm not sure why it is giving all these issues here. Let me just, okay, maybe I'll just get rid of this first. Okay, let's do this properly first. So what is the request that we want to place in? Okay, so the request we want to place in is the URL, right? Which we already have. So let's just look at that URL. So it looks like this, right? So I can just copy this, then paste that in, and then I'll just put okay, so let's hard code it first. Okay, let's hard code it first. Okay, so that's the code, right? This is the code. So let me explain what this code is doing first, right? So the first thing, okay, so what's happening here? So when the chat route is triggered, what happens is it will retrieve amount and then the to currency and the from currency from the parameters, just like last week. Then we will access this URL, right? And then the function will call back with the response. Okay, so that's based on the documentation of this request object. It will allow us to retrieve a response. So this response will look exactly like what we got. Okay, so it will look exactly like this. This will be the response. Okay, it will be a JSON response converted to JavaScript object. So a JSON response converted to JavaScript object. This will be returned. So what we're doing here is we are actually reading the rate. Okay, so here we are reading what? Rate 1. So what is rate 1 here? We're going to read, okay, so we're reading from rate 1, which will be this. This will be the rate. And then rate 2 will be this one, right? Whatever rate that is. So we will only transfer 2 rates for this one. We'll just have rate 1 and then rate 2. So you can see it's under this, right? So it's under this rates key, which is basically the value of rates is an object with. Okay, so that's basically that. And so that's where we get the object that rates that from C, object that rates from 2C, right? And then basically what we're doing here is we're doing some mathematics. First, we're going to convert the amount. We're going to ensure the amount is a float. So this parse float, if you look it up, it will just actually convert or make sure that this amount is a floating point or a number, right? Floating point number. Rate 2 will also ensure that rate 2 is a floating point number. Why do I want to ensure it's a floating point number? It's because, remember, we're reading it from the internet. It might be treated as a string, right? Just to be sure, we're treating it as a float. And so I'm just doing some math here to actually convert the amount. Okay, so times parse float amount times rate 2 slash. Wait, so there are some missing things in this document. Let me just. Okay, so it should be parse float. I believe parse float rate 1. Okay, parse float rate 1 here. That will be the total. I mean, that's the math to convert it. And then we shall have here, let's format it. Okay, so here, let's just do the conversion. Just kind of comment some of these things out. It's not really important. And then basically, we're going to just respond back, right, with fulfillment text. Okay, this is actually extra. Sorry, there. So it should look like that. So just take a good look at it, right? So this is the code for this. It's also in the Polymol. Now, to make things a little bit simple, right? Oh, by the way, this part here will just make sure the decimal places are only 4 digits. So this will send that back. Okay, to make this thing a little bit simpler, we're just going to hard code some of these things first. So I'm just going to comment this out, right? And then just to test it, right? So we'll just set var amount is equal to 100, var to C is equal to SGD, or let's say USD, and then var from C is equal to SGD. Okay, so let's just test this out now. We're going to simply node app.js. Okay, so I'm gonna test this now in I'm gonna test this on Postman. Sorry, you cannot test this on the browser because I've set it as a post. Okay, so I'll just click a new one here, and then I'll set it as post, and then I will just set here http 127.0.0.1. What is this? Colon chat /chat, right? /chat. So we hard coded everything, so this should trigger, right? Let's try. Oh, sorry, I didn't put the port. USD is not defined. Wait, let's just double check what went wrong there. Oh, sorry, this has to be a string. I apologize. Let's try that. Oh, I didn't run it. Sorry, I have to run this first. So Control C. I didn't restart it, so I have to run it again. Okay, let's copy that. Okay, there you go. So it's saying 100 SGD is equal to 71. It should be USD, right? Which I didn't put in. That's okay, right? But you see it's working. So most important class is you test that this URL is actually working. Okay, we hard coded it. Actually, we don't need these 3. We just need this 2 actually, like so. So it's working. So if I run this like this, so there, so that's working. So I'm just going to make some slight adjustments here to make sure that it is correct. So I'm going to put here plus 2C. Then I will just put a space here so that it looks a bit nicer. So to fix here, we'll just put 4 digits. 4 decimal places. Sorry, 4 decimal places. Let's quickly do that. One more to make it look. Oh, there's no space. Sorry, it's not still as what I want. Let's just put another space here. There you go. So that looks a lot better, and that's ready to be given to our chatbot. Okay, so let's just make some changes now. Okay, so originally we hard coded it. Now, okay, now there's a few ways to fix this thing. This thing still looks a little bit too complicated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to convert this query string into something more dynamic, right? So there's a bunch of ways you could do that. Okay, I'm going to show you 2 ways. The first way is to make this SGD dynamic. Okay, so obviously this one was not dynamic. Sorry about that. It was actually, let me just do it like this, right? So it will be plus SGD, sorry, plus, so let's say the first one is 2C, right? I think that's what I did in the practical. Oh no, the first one is from C, and the next one is 2C, right? From C, okay, plus, so there's a comma, right? Then plus, all right? So then that situation, it becomes a bit more dynamic. So let's say I change this to, what should I change this to? Let's say, let's just say JPY. So you will see that this 2C will be placed here, right? That will be the second one, and then from C will be the euro, right? So it's dynamic now. It will change accordingly. because I don't want it to be hard-coded, right? So that's why I'm replacing that with variables. So let's test that. So that should work in Postman now, right? There, so I see 100 euros equal to 12,000. So if I change this to the from is SGD, let's say, and I change it to, so you see it's dynamic, whatever I put in. 100 SGD 7000 JP1. So anyway, that's more or less how you would create this this query string, right? You just basically add, especially a get. This is what you call a get. This request itself is a get. Even though this route is a post, this request you're making to this API is a get. So this is a little bit easier to work with because you can see all the variables or all the data that you are passing in, right? So you can see that the return can be taken here from the body. So this one here will convert this JSON into a object, right? You have a JSON.parse. We'll convert this to a JavaScript object, right? Because you can only manipulate it if it's a JavaScript object. Then this one here will retrieve from this, you see, from this object, right? It will retrieve now the important part. So in this case, I'm retrieving for rate 1, this one here. The rate 1 is this, 1.57, and rate 2 is this one, 121. Then I am just doing some math to come up with this total and multiplying it by the amount. Okay, so I'm making sure it's floating point by applying this function parse float to ensure it is a float. Okay, so that's basically that. Now let's do one final check and let's remove this. Let's remove this now and let's replace it with the Dialogflow inputs. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to, so for this, I'm going to change our URL here. Yeah, okay, so it's a post. Now what do I need to do? I also need to set the body of this. So we're going to test it with Dialogflow as usual. So this will be raw, and then this will be JSON, right? Then from Dialogflow, since we already have Dialogflow running, where was that? So let's just go back to Dialogflow. And so let's just test it, right? So let's say convert 10 USD to SGD, right? So we can actually go to diagnostic info. Same thing, just copy the raw response. You can see that the parameters are all set, the amount, it's all here, right? So we can go into Dialogflow here. I'm sorry, a Postman, and then just paste the body here, like so, right? So our code will read this, and then it will display that. So just try it. So if you click send, and there you go. See, 10 SGD na USD. So it's ready to go. Okay, it's ready to be used. So let's test it out now. Okay, so let us now, since it's working now in Postman, we can upload this now to Heroku, right? So we can just do what? Git, oh wait, let's Heroku login first. Heroku login. Then let's just do the 3 steps, right? So git add dot, git commit -m test, right? Then we see there's some changes that we just write. Then git push Heroku master. Okay, so again, let's just test this URL here. Should be logged in. So again, we go to Postman. So I'm going to replace this now, right? This is our route, our URL. Let's run this now, right? So we click, oh sorry, it's wrong. So make sure this is exactly right, huh? And click send, and there, so it's working. So there should be no reason it will not work in Dialogflow. It's already in Heroku running. Always test it in Postman first, huh? So let's just now go to Dialogflow. Okay, so the route is already set, right? We have nothing else to do. Okay, so all we need to do now is set fulfillment here. So fulfillment now will be enabled. Let's enable fulfillment. Let's save that. Okay, so it's saved. So let's test it. So let's convert let's say 100 SGD to MYR. Oh, there you go. See, 100 SGD is equal to 306 MYR. Okay, let's convert 100 SGD. You can even put yeah, I think it will detect even with decimals. So let's say convert 100.50 SGD2, and there you go, right? So now you have your own currency chatbot. You can talk to it, ask it for currency information, and this same process will go in for any API that's out there. There's thousands and thousands of these REST APIs. So the key here, class, of course, there's a learning curve, but the key here is to know how this code works, number one, and number two, how to look for how to send the request. No? What is the URL? What are the parameters in the query string? And we're going to make that a bit clearer or reinforce this with another practical, which is on the weather, right? Which you'll see is the same repetition. You have to read the documentation, find the URL, and you see the code will essentially be the same. So if you want the chatbot to answer things about the weather, you can. Currency, you can. If you want to get news, you can. You know, it's up to you. But you have to do some coding. It's true. All right. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.